Stephen Morgan, the Shadow Minister for Schools, you're joined here with the Parliamentary candidate Chris Vince. Behind you is a very sad sight. What concerns do you have here?
Well, it's really good to be in Harlow with Chris Vince as our parliamentary candidate to celebrate the GCSE results that young people across this area are getting today, and we've been visiting another school nearby to recognise the achievements of young people in what's been a really difficult time for young people. I can't believe what I'm seeing, frankly. I know Chris has been a tireless champion for schools in the area as a former teacher himself, and I think what we've got here is a real issue that's going to affect parents and children in this community, and we need to get to the bottom of what the issues are and ask lots of questions to make sure that this school gets reopened as soon as possible.
What would you say is one of your first questions?
Well, I think we need to understand what the problems are and how is this allowed to happen. We've got a local MP who is an education minister. You know, we need to find out what's happened here, because this is going to cause significant disruption to families locally, and Chris is onto that already with his public meeting that he's got later this week. We've got to get answers and make sure that children get back to school as quickly as possible.
Because we have to make sure that there are 1,000 children displaced here, and those all the time, because some people might accuse you of playing politics here, which is an issue about children and their education. How do you respond?
Well, we're absolutely committed to making sure that every young person goes on to succeed and thrive, and that means being able to go to a local school. But sadly, what we're seeing here is pretty common across the country. We know that 1 in 6 schools have buildings that risk to children's lives. We've been pushing in Parliament for the Minister to publish the data. He reluctantly did that in July. We're going to hold the government to account for the failings on school buildings, and Chris locally is going to keep on championing children and young people locally.
Chris, I have interviewed a couple of times over last week, but you echo the Shadow Minister's concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate Stephen coming down here today to see this situation. I think it shows how seriously that Labour are taking this particular issue and the issue that Stephen has raised with schools across the country. It was wonderful to be in another school earlier and celebrating with young people their GCSE results. It's what we should be doing here. Instead, we've got a building that's closed, and a lot of young people that potentially have had their education displaced and are really concerned about the start of the school year. So I'm delighted that Stephen's come along today, and we'll be asking questions of the education ministers about why this issue has been allowed to happen. So we need to continue to press for answers, frankly, and it is the responsibility of education ministers like Mr. Halfon to answer why this has been allowed to happen.
And finally, would you say that under a Labour government, we'll have a general election probably next year, what would be different about, say, for example, procurement, building of schools, to prevent things like this happening again?
Well, I think Labour's record on school buildings speaks for itself. We saw the transformation of school buildings up and down the country. What we need to do is understand the scale of the problem. We've been pushing the government to publish that data. We will now be looking at that data. We deserve the very best for our children and young people, and that's why people like Chris are onto the case and will do what he can to speak up for children and young people in this area.